The morning sun came through the kitchen window at an angle that made the dust visible. I was standing at the counter, coffee halfway to my lips, when I noticed the empty spot on the shelf where my father's watch used to sit. The leather box was gone, just an outline in the dust where it had been for 3 years. "Where's the watch?" I asked. My wife didn't look up from her phone. "What watch?" "My father's, the one in the leather box." She waved her hand like she was brushing away smoke. "Oh, that old thing? I donated it yesterday, spring cleaning. You never wore it anyway." My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. Something much stranger happened. The room got very quiet, like all the air had been pulled out through a crack I couldn't see. I set the coffee down. Carefully. Precisely. "You donated my father's watch." "Robert, it was just sitting there collecting dust. The Goodwill truck came by and I cleared out the closet, the garage, some of those boxes in the spare room. You've been saying for months we need to declutter." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I stood there looking at that empty spot on the shelf, and all I could think was how my father had shown me that watch 2 weeks before he died, how he'd held it in his palm and told me to keep it somewhere safe, how the crystal was scratched and the leather band was cracked, but how he'd smiled when he wound it. She went back to scrolling. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she'd never asked, was that I'd already called 3 antique dealers about that watch. She had no idea what she'd set in motion. "My name is Robert Chen. I'm 51 years old, and I'd been married to Linda for 17 years. On paper, everything looked stable. I worked in supply chain management for a medical equipment distributor. Steady income, good insurance, a house in a decent neighborhood with a mortgage that would be paid off in 12 years. We had routines. Friday was grocery shopping. Sunday was meal prep. Wednesday was trash day, and I always remembered to pull the bins to the curb. But there were moments, small ones, the kind you tell yourself don't matter. Like when I'd mention wanting to visit my mother for Thanksgiving, and Linda would sigh and say, "We already committed to my sisters." When I'd suggest we save more aggressively for retirement, and she'd laugh and say, "You worry too much." When I'd walk into the living room and she'd be on the phone with her book club, and her voice would change when I appeared, get quieter, more careful, like I was interrupting something important. I let it go. I let a lot go. The watch had belonged to my father, a 1960s Omega Seamaster. He'd bought it in Singapore when he was in the Merchant Marine, long before he met my mother, long before I was born. It wasn't flashy. The dial had aged to a cream color. The case had scratches. The original bracelet was long gone, replaced by a leather strap that had cracked at the lugs. 3 months earlier, I'd started researching it. Vintage watch forums, auction records. I'd found a dealer in the city who specialized in Omega. I'd sent him photos. He'd asked me to bring it in for an appraisal. I'd been planning to go that week. Linda didn't know any of this because I'd stopped telling her about things that mattered to me. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned it was easier to stay quiet than to hear her dismissals dressed up as practicality. I called the Goodwill 15 minutes after she told me. They said donations were processed within 48 hours and sent to regional sorting facilities. They couldn't track individual items. They suggested I check back with the store, but they couldn't make promises. I drove there anyway. The woman at the donation counter was kind but firm. "Sir, we get hundreds of items a day. Without a receipt or a specific description, and with processing already started, I just can't help you. I'm sorry." I described the watch, the leather box, the scratched crystal. She shook her head. "Even if I could find it, once it's in the system, it's considered inventory. We can't return donations." I nodded, thanked her, walked back to my car. That was when I sat in the parking lot and did something I'd never done before. I opened my phone and called Marcus, the antique dealer I'd been emailing. "Marcus, this is Robert Chen. We've been corresponding about the Omega Seamaster." "Oh yes, the 62 with the original dial. You were going to bring it in." "It's gone. My wife donated it to Goodwill yesterday." There was a pause. "She what?" I explained. He listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Robert, I don't know how to tell you this gently, so I'll just say it. Based on the photos you sent, that watch was worth somewhere between $18,000 and $22,000. Maybe more at auction. The dial configuration, the case condition, the caliber movement. Collectors pay serious money for that reference in that condition. My hands went cold. Not hot, cold. I see. Have you checked estate sale services? Pawn shops nearby? Sometimes donations get intercepted before processing. I'll try. Call me if you find it. I have 3 clients who'd buy it sight unseen. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I watched people walk in and out of the Goodwill with their bags in their boxes. And I thought about how my wife had waved her hand like she was brushing away smoke. When I got home, Linda was in the bedroom folding laundry. "Did you find it?" she asked. "No." "Well, maybe someone who really needs a watch will get some use out of it. Your dad would probably like that." That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I didn't argue. I walked to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I started making a list. Every joint account, every credit card, every bill in my name, every automatic payment. I took screenshots of balances. I downloaded 3 years of bank statements. I logged into our investment accounts and made copies of every statement. Then I called Stephen, my college roommate, who'd been a family law attorney for 20 years. "Steve, I need advice, not as a friend, as a client." "What happened?" I told him about the watch, about the value, about the donation, about 17 years of small dismissals that I'd told myself didn't matter. He was quiet for a moment. "Robert, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to really think about the answer. Is this about the watch, or is this about everything the watch represents?" "Both." "Okay, then we need to talk about your options. But first, I need you to do exactly what I say." Over the next week, I followed Stephen's instructions with the same precision I used to track shipments and manage inventory. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. I redirected my paycheck. I changed my passwords. I made copies of our marriage certificate, our tax returns, our property deed. I created a folder on an encrypted drive with every piece of financial documentation from our marriage. Linda noticed I was quieter than usual, but she didn't ask why. She was busy planning a girls' trip to Scottsdale with her book club. She showed me the Airbnb listing, asked if I minded covering the cost. I said it was fine. I didn't tell her I'd already calculated how much she'd spent on similar trips over the past 5 years. $14,000, not including shopping. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing a shipping manifest when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Chen?" "Speaking." "This is Patricia Nolan from Nolan Estate Services. I specialize in evaluating items from estate sales and charitable donations. I acquired a vintage Omega watch yesterday from a regional Goodwill processing center, and the serial number trace led me to your father's estate records. I wanted to reach out before listing it." My throat went dry. "You have the watch?" "I do. I paid the organization's standard processing fee and acquired it through proper channels. However, given the provenance and the circumstances, I wanted to contact the family first. Would you be interested in purchasing it back?" "How much?" "Given its condition and market value, I typically list it at $24,000. But if you can provide documentation of ownership and the story behind it, I'd be willing to sell it back to you for $12,000. Half market value. It feels like the right thing to do." I checked the time. 2:47 p.m. "Can I call you back in an hour?" "Of course." I sat there looking at my computer screen, at the shipping manifest, at the inventory reports, at the life I'd built around routines and quiet accommodations and letting things go. Then I called Stephen. "She found it. An estate buyer pulled it from Goodwill Processing." "What's she asking?" $12,000. "Do you have it?" "I can get it." "Then get it. And Robert, don't tell Linda until we're ready." I called Patricia back. We arranged to meet the next day at her office. I withdrew $12,000 from my separate account, cash. When I handed her the money and she handed me the leather box, I didn't open it right away. I just held it, the weight of it, the reality of it. Your father had good taste, Patricia said. These Seamasters from the early 60s are becoming increasingly rare in this condition. He bought it in Singapore, 1963. The provenance adds value. If you ever decide to sell, call me first. I drove home with a watch in my jacket pocket. Linda's car was in the driveway. I could hear her on the phone through the kitchen window, laughing. I didn't go inside. I sat in the car and opened the box. The watch looked exactly as I remembered. The cream dial, the scratched crystal, the aged lume on the hands that glowed faint green in the dark. I wound it carefully. The movement caught and began to tick. Precise, measured, unburdened by anything except the passage of time. That night at dinner, Linda talked about the Scottsdale trip, about the spa they'd booked, about the restaurant reservations. I nodded, asked questions, cleared the plates. She didn't notice the watch on my wrist. The next morning, I got a text from Stephen. Papers are ready. We need to talk about next steps. I met him at his office that afternoon. He slid a folder across his desk. I've drafted a separation agreement, equitable division of assets, clean split of retirement accounts, house goes on the market and proceeds split 50-50. No alimony on either side. You keep personal property acquired before or during the marriage. She keeps hers. What about the watch? Legally, it was a family heirloom gifted to you. It's not marital property. She donated it without your consent, which could actually be argued as intentional destruction of separate property. But I don't think we need to go there. We just need her to sign. When? Whenever you're ready. I looked at the folder, at the pages inside that would end 17 years, at the careful language that would separate our lives into neat columns of assets and debts and property. I'm ready. Over the next 3 weeks, Linda's behavior shifted. She started getting phone calls at odd hours. She'd step outside to take them. She became interested in our finances, asking questions about accounts she'd never cared about before. Wanting to know about my retirement balance, about the equity in the house. I answered every question calmly, precisely. I showed her the statements she asked for. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already moved my half into protected accounts, that Stephen had filed preliminary paperwork, that I'd been documenting every financial transaction for months. Then her sister called me. Robert, what's going on? Linda says you've been acting strange. I've been acting the same as always, Karen. She's worried you're planning something. I'm always planning something. Supply chain management is all about planning. You know what I mean. I do, and I think Linda should ask me directly if she has concerns. That night, Linda came into my office. I was reviewing shipping routes for a new contract. We need to talk, she said. I saved my work, turned in my chair. Okay. Are you having an affair? No. Then what's going on? You've been different, distant. I've been thinking. About what? About whether you've ever actually asked me about something that mattered to me. About whether you know anything about my life beyond what's convenient for you. Her face changed, hardened. That's not fair. You donated my father's watch without asking me. I already apologized for that. You didn't apologize. You said someone who needs a watch could use it. It was a mistake, Robert. I didn't know it was important. You didn't ask. She crossed her arms. So this is about the watch? No, the watch is about everything else. I stood up, walked to my desk, opened the drawer and pulled out the leather box. This is the watch. I opened it. She stared. How did you? I bought it back from an estate dealer who pulled it from Goodwill Processing for $12,000. The color drained from her face. 12,000? It's worth 24, maybe more. She gave me a family discount. Linda sat down. Actually sat down. Her hands were shaking. Robert, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't know because you never asked. Just like you didn't ask about Thanksgiving with my mother, or the retirement savings, or why I stopped talking about things that matter. We can fix this. Can we? I sat down across from her, put the watch box on the table between us. Linda, when's my birthday? She blinked. What? My birthday. What day is it? April 12th? April 9th. That's close. We've been married 17 years. I watched her process that, watched her face cycle through denial, defensiveness, then something that looked almost like fear. What do you want? She asked. I want you to understand that silence isn't the same as consent, that accommodation isn't the same as agreement, that I've been here the whole time and you stopped seeing me years ago. So what, you want a divorce? I slid the folder across the table, the one Stephen had prepared. I want clarity. She opened it, read the first page, then the second. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. You already did this. You already decided. I decided when you waved your hand like brushing away smoke. That's not fair. Money doesn't explain behavior, Linda. It reveals it. You gave away something precious to me because you assumed it had no value. That tells me everything I need to know about how you see me. She tried bargaining then, promised counseling, promised change, promised she'd be more attentive, more present, more everything. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I stood up. I'll give you a week to review the agreement with your own attorney. If you want to negotiate terms, we can do that. But the decision is made. I picked up the watch box, walked to the door. Robert, I turned. I never meant to hurt you. I know, that's what makes it worse. I didn't wait for her response. I walked out to my car, drove to the extended stay hotel I'd already booked, and unpacked the small suitcase I'd prepared 3 weeks earlier. The room was quiet, generic art on the walls, a table with 2 chairs, a window that looked out on the parking lot. I sat at the table and opened the watch box one more time, took out the Omega, put it on my wrist. The leather was soft, the weight was familiar, the ticking was steady. My father had worn this watch through typhoons in the South China Sea, through the birth of his children, through my mother's cancer treatments, through every moment that mattered and every moment that didn't. It kept time. That was its job. It didn't judge. It didn't accommodate. It just marked the passage of seconds into minutes, into hours, into years. I thought about calling my mother, telling her what happened, but it was late and she'd worry, and there would be time for explanations. Instead, I sat there in that quiet room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clean. Not victorious, not vindicated, just unburdened. The watch ticked. The seconds passed. The night got darker. And somewhere in that darkness, I understood what my father had been trying to tell me when he handed me that watch 2 weeks before he died. Keep it somewhere safe. Not the watch, myself. Linda signed the papers 4 days later. Her attorney tried to argue for a larger share of the retirement accounts, but Stephen shut it down with documentation of her spending patterns. We settled on the original terms. House on the market, assets split, clean separation. The last time I saw her, we met at a coffee shop to exchange keys and final documents. She looked smaller somehow, tired. I really didn't know about the watch, she said. I believe you. Does that matter? It matters, but it doesn't change anything. She nodded, slid the keys across the table. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. I picked up the keys. Our house keys. The ones I'd used for 17 years. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have said when things bothered me instead of letting them accumulate. That's on me. So we're both sorry. We are. She left first. I watched her walk to her car, get in, drive away. I sat there for a while longer, finished my coffee, checked the time. 4:02 p.m. The watch was keeping perfect time. 2 months later, I moved into a small condo near the river. 1 bedroom, a kitchen just big enough for 1 person, a balcony that caught the morning light. I kept my job, kept my routines, Friday was still grocery shopping, but now I only bought what I needed. Sunday was still meal prep, but now I cooked things I actually wanted to eat. I started visiting my mother every other weekend. She never asked what happened with Linda. She just made tea and listened when I was ready to talk. One Saturday morning, I was standing on my balcony with coffee, watching the river, when my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the antique dealer. "Still have the Seamaster? Collector just contacted me. He's offering $32,000. I looked at my wrist. At the watch my father had carried through storms, at the scratched crystal and the cream dial, and the hands that kept moving forward. I texted back, "Not for sale, but thank you." He replied, "Understood. Some things aren't about money." I set the phone down, took a sip of coffee, watched the light on the water. The watch ticked, the river flowed. The morning opened up in front of me like a room I'd never seen before. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's the space you need to hear what you've been trying to tell yourself for years. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, and that was enough. If you'd been in my place, would you have fought to get the watch back? Or would you have let it go and moved on? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence means more than you know. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. Let's keep walking this road together.